was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was funny you guys were so tight, though. That was really
It was only at the end that like it all hit. I slept, thank God for I slept in for the first time in like since when I slept till like 10. So.
Oh my God.
So I'm like finally rested.
Those guys, Knuckles and those guys were convinced that you'd gone dancing, that you were off going
Really?
somewhere else.
They thought we were dancing. They thought we were lying to get out of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay longer. I didn't want to leave, but I was literally like, I was falling asleep on Evan. I was like, okay, we should probably like.
Yeah. No, it's good.
No, we like walked right by like the Holly. Oh, we're gonna try to go to the Vanity Fair party tonight.
Okay.
We're like determined to get in. There's
funny.
Evan. There's a song. I should say.
Good. At least we've got Evan. Do you know who the guy behind him is?
Wait, you see, it's really funny because I knew that's Nonny's investigation. It's not there. But
I knew him, but I keep not.
with the long hair.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
funny because I knew he saw Body Mike and I was saying hi, like we were just smiling time. But I didn't realize, didn't make the connection. I didn't realize that was Scar.
Okay,
And
I
so
should say that.
then like Danielle from Alice 5 was like, oh, you need to show Dario from your piece. Have you seen it? I was like, oh no, like, I've been wanting to meet him. Like, can you introduce us? She walked over to him. And I was like, oh my God, hi. Like, I'm so glad you like Body Mike. It's such an instant like, oops.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I need to talk to. I should probably say hello to him then. I kept recognizing him, but not knowing who he was. You know.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be kind of that would be politic.
Politic.
Yes.
It's a fun word.
I think we should wait till then. Oh, there's a better. That's good.
Yeah, only 4 American projects. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that was very sweet, and I was like, oh, I still have the whole drawing with you, like I still get onto it. I also did finally see his. Have you seen him from the main square?
No.
His piece that won Venice last year. I did finally see it in Oklahoma, and I genuinely really did like it.
Yeah.
So it was very good.
That's good.
Yeah, it was good.
Did you see the other one that won last year?
I did not see the other two. I don't. Do you know those?
Yeah, they're Taiwanese. The woman is Taiwanese. Yeah, and her piece is in the Taiwanese thing.
Gotcha.
So you can watch it in the next few days. It's kind of intriguing.
Her piece from last year is over there?
Yeah, it's called The Man Who Couldn't Leave. Yeah, it is. It is, but it's very different. It's very different.
Oh, in like what way? Like experimental? I love experimental.
Yeah, it's very experimental. Stick with it. The first bit is slightly. I was like, why is everybody going on about this? No, like maybe 15 minutes. I don't know.
Okay,
No. But yeah, it is experimental.
She won the grand jury.
Yeah. She won the big one.
Is it like narrative or is it?
Yes,
it is. What is it about?
It's about the dictatorship in Taiwan.
That makes 2 dictatorship ones. So some of the research is also about dictatorship.
Okay, and it's 360.
It's 360 video.
Yes.
Oh, it's a video.
Very, very beautiful. Like the fidelity is incredible. I haven't seen 360 video with that fidelity before, so it's kind of worth watching just even for that.
And the other one was X-Skate, which I never saw, but it's just a little funny.
I haven't seen it.
It's just like an arcade. It's like an AR game. Like a cute.
Okay.
And it won like the I don't know what they call it. It's like an achievement prize or.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the time?
It's 4:05.
Should we give it till 10 past?
I think we should probably start.
Do you think so? And how many people are here though?
Enough to start.
Oh, okay. Sweet. Okay, let's go.
All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, Venice Immersive. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Stephanie Tomlin, and I'm the Director of Industry Relations for ASU's brand new 11,000 square meter Future of Media facility based in Mesa, Arizona, called the Media and Immersive Experience Center, or the Mix Center, as we call it colloquially, and sort of the mothership for X-Arts programs at ASU, which we're calling our new focus on immersive media and extended reality arts. I'm super excited to be here today and introduce our amazing panelists. So first up, we have my colleague, Mary Matheson, who's an immersive director and our professor of practice for the Narrative and Emerging Media program based in downtown Los Angeles. And of course, one of the main reasons we're here today, we have Cameron Kostopoulos, who's the already award-winning creator and director of Body of Mine, and has done it all while being a student as part of the Narrative and Emerging Media program. So I think we're gonna keep it pretty casual today, and I welcome Mary and Cameron as well to kind of ask each other questions and even heckle some of our friends in the audience who might contribute to the conversation today. And of course, following this panel, Cameron has the Meet the Creators talk outside, so we'll be doing that, followed by happy hour, and we would love for you to join us directly following on the patio. So I think before we kind of get going, just to set the stage for Narrative and Emerging Media, it's one of 4 brand new graduate programs we have at ASU, based in California, but then based in Arizona. We have 3 with a focus on extended reality technologies, one that's kind of an engineering focus, one that's a little bit more immersive experience design, based in the College of Design, and then we have one about futures in design and about workshopping and prototyping futures and applying these immersive technologies to helping organizations think strategically about that. So I would love to kick things off and just, open us up to, tell us a little bit more about your guys' background, and how you arrived at VR rather than more traditional media. Mary, what led you into this field?
Cool. So I basically came at VR from documentary filmmaking. I started off as a journalist and then went into, actually I was a writer and a radio journalist, and then switched into film, and then in 2016 switched to VR. So I basically got into it because I did a lot of work. I did a lot of documentaries that were about documentaries for impact. So they were usually kind of part of a strategy or a campaign by organizations like the UN or nonprofits. So I did a lot of films around girls' rights, human rights, in sort of far-flung areas of the world. And for me, I was always trying to, connect my audiences in the UK or the US with, a character who might be in a completely different country. And so, usually or traditionally, what you would do is bring that person, that character story into, daily life in the UK or the US, either through the TV or radio or newspapers, as we used to have. And then suddenly I kind of realized that, like watching VR, that in fact I was taken as the audience to the other country and to the character's world, and the character themselves could talk to us about their world. And it was absolutely revolutionary for me in terms of my storytelling. So, really as a sort of powerful medium, and as somebody who was, been telling stories for literally my career, it was completely transformative.
And Cameron, what about you? How did you arrive in VR?
Yeah, my background is a lot less impressive than Mary's. I've been in this field for about 6 months, since our first premiere at South by Southwest. Since then, we won the Special Jury Prize there, won a BAFTA Student Award, and Best XR at Games for Change. So I think I'll stick with this field for a little while. But really, it kind of, my background is in film production as a director of live action work and experimental cinema. Always had kind of a passion for experimentalism and using cinema to tell stories that dealt with more complex issues of our psyche and of human psychology and just asking questions, really, and trying to find the best medium for that. And stumbling into VR was kind of very natural because VR really is the most experimental form of cinema there is. And what you can do with VR that you can't with film is when you watch a film, you are watching a character and you are a spectator and you're invited to watch from a third person field of view, versus with VR, you're invited to be the main character of the story. You are not just a spectator, but you really are an active participant. You're a character in your own story. And that's what we did with Body of Mine, taking that as literally as far as you can, where it's your body is the canvas instead of a film existing on a screen in the theater. The film exists in your hands and on your body and on the tattoos that you have on your chest, on your surgery scars. So, yeah.
It's been so amazing to see Cam do this as a first-time creator.
I know. Cam, what was the first VR piece you watched?
Oh, I think the first one that I watched that I actually really loved, maybe I saw something before this, but it was Where Thoughts Go by Lucas Risotto. I still really love that piece. And if you've seen Body of Mine, there's some overlap. It's definitely inspired a little bit by Lucas's work. And because I think that piece is such a great example of how VR can be used to connect people, especially through the lens of anonymity. I think that anonymity invites a lot more open and honest honesty from participants and users and just people in general. Because especially in VR, when you just have disembodied figures and you're hearing all this noise, you're just a lot more likely to be vulnerable yourself. And so I really gravitate towards those intimate VR experiences that are about people and connecting people. That's what Body Mind does, connecting you with the stories of trans people. So that's the first one I think that I saw that really inspired me.
And Cam, this was your undergraduate project, right, that you brought to ASU?
Yeah, this was actually. So this began as an undergraduate thesis at USC. Wanting to just do something different for my thesis instead of another live action short. And coming out of school, one of my professors sent it to Nonny de la Peña, who was supposed to be here with us in Venice, but Miss Rona got a hold of her first. So it got sent to her, and she makes very similar work and had been for way longer. And she saw it and was like, okay, you really should come study with us. And at the time I didn't know who she was, but then I was like, oh, of course, it's Nonny. Everyone here knows Nonny. So I came and studied with her and Mary, and they really, really, really were instrumental. I definitely would not be here without them. So they really were my biggest champions.
Awesome. Well, we certainly miss Nonny today, but I think to kind of frame up the Narrative and Emerging Media program, as well as the other collection of graduate degrees, we can hear from Nonny herself, and we have a trailer to show you the kind of intros to what we're doing.
World building to me is about creating. It doesn't matter what you're creating, something as small as a world where an advertisement would exist, or if you're creating what you think the future of Arizona would look like.
XArts is a term we're now using to describe all the different creative processes using extended reality, virtual, augmented, any kind of immersive or mixed technologies that allow us to create immersive new stories.
We use our cell phones all of the time, and it's changing our bone structure. We're actually seeing us as human beings slumping down. We can make these technologies more human.
We're moving so fast that the future is tomorrow. If you're going to be a responsible designer, artist, you have to keep up with the world as it is, because your job is to tell the world what it should be.
Our societies have shifted to digital articulations of society. And so the question is like, who's going to build those articulations?
We offer courses that are cross-disciplinary in nature, that are enabling students to move kind of diagonally through their careers and through their interests.
There's level designing, storytelling, character design, world building, programming, audio design. All are necessary to make a really compelling experience come together.
Life gets so much richer with the more experience you have. Futures have historically been thought of as being something for Western wealthy people.
We need to create systems that allow nurses, social workers, entrepreneurs to come to this technology and dream up what our new ways of living might be.
We're trying to think about how to be more inclusive, how to use these new technologies in a way that's respectful and engaging. Right now, the demographic is pretty monocultural, and we need to change that.
The reality is the future is all of us.
The amount of energy and resources that this university is putting towards new and immersive technologies is really unparalleled.
My dream is where kids can actually feel like they're in a brand new world without having to go to a theme park or spend a lot of money. World building doesn't care what socioeconomic status you are. World building just says if you have an open mind and open heart, come on in.
So we got to hear from Nonny. So Mary, narrative and emerging media, how did you hear about it? What drew you to ASU in terms of the mission of the kind of overall X-Arts programs as well as the NEM program?
Well, I mean, it's a good time to talk about Nonny, actually. I mean, I'm sure most people here know who she is, but, and it's kind of relevant as well that you know, as I started out my VR journey, there was this one woman who sort of stuck out amongst the crowd, really. And she was, you know, she's known as the godmother of VR because she's been in this business since 2007, which is incredible. You know, a lot of us joined around 2015, 2016, and we're now considered veterans. But actually, she was right there, you know, designing the headsets like the Oculus with Palmer Luckey. So, you know, she really is an icon. And you know, our paths had crossed a few times, but we ended up working together on a project in 2020, just during COVID, where I was creative lead on a 10-part series about young women around the world who were, you know, leading campaigns or changing things in their communities. And we needed a US partner that could film in the US, Mexico, and Brazil. And the first person that came to my mind was obviously Nonny and her company, Matheson. So we worked together on that, and just, I think, you know, we had such a kind of joint vision about the philosophy behind that series, which was, you know, to hear from young women who you don't normally hear from, and to sort of highlight them and highlight their roles, and actually to co-create with them, so they also had a role in telling their own stories. And actually, because it was COVID, you know, a lot of the countries that we were filming in, we filmed in 10 different countries, a lot of them were shut down. So what we had to do with the story in India was actually send the camera to the young woman in India so she could film her own story, which was really cool. And actually, it's one of the better films, in my opinion, because, you know, she tells her own story. So Nonny and I sort of kind of really worked well together in that capacity. And then the summer after, I had been teaching. I basically created and set up a master's at the University of London, Royal Holloway, in immersive storytelling. So a very similar kind of program to this, but the first one pretty much in the world of that, you know, on that topic. And so Nonny was asked by ASU to set up this program, and she came to the UK and asked me if I would join her. And as I'm sure I've said to many people, when Nonny de la Peña comes knocking at your door, you don't really say no, even if it is LA and I live in London. But, so I got really excited about that. I knew that what she was trying to build would be something really different. But then what was really exciting for me was actually learning about the vision of ASU, which was very, very inclusive. And their school mission or motto is, it's not about who we exclude, it's about who we include. And that was really close to my heart, because I felt like it wasn't, I didn't just want to bring in more women into this business. It's actually, all of those voices that we're not normally hearing from, So that was hugely exciting. And then, we set up our sort of program, which obviously we have the Masters is the sort of flagship education program, which Cameron was part of our first cohort, and we kind of laugh about the fact that you've set the bar really, really high. So, it's kind of cool. We now have our second cohort, and they, I've only been with them for 2 weeks, teaching them for 2 weeks, and already they're like, oh my God, she's going to Venice with one of the students from last year. So, that's exciting. It's really great. We're building something. We're definitely, at the beginning. But will you put it on the next slide, and then I'll talk about our mission sort of generally.
Yeah, next up we actually have a trailer.
Oh, is it the video?
So we can
sorry.
take a look.
Yeah, thank you.
Arizona State University is ranked #1 in innovation, ahead of Stanford and MIT for the past 8 years. Now, ASU is offering a brand new one-of-a-kind master's program in narrative and emerging media to create new narratives in augmented, virtual and extended reality, virtual production, and experiential media. Based at the new ASU California Center in Los Angeles, the program for narrative and emerging media is a collaborative effort between the Sidney Poitier New American Film School and the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. This program draws on the talent of the global entertainment capital of the world to drive innovation and inclusion for next-generation storytelling. The curriculum for this one-year program arms students with cutting-edge visual storytelling techniques taught by top industry innovators, including award-winning directors Nonny de la Peña and Mary Matheson. Students explore the emerging media toolkit, learn about the marketplace, connect with the field's top professionals, and develop critical media project management skills to tell creative fictional stories or nonfiction journalistic work. Housed in the recently renovated historic Herald Examiner building, the ASU California Center was custom designed to include a state-of-the-art emerging media hub with a green screen studio for virtual reality and live broadcasts, a planar LED wall with OptiTrack and disguise systems for driving industry-standard virtual productions and immersive content. Here, students master methods for integrating values of equity and social justice into their research, while remaining mindful of the needs of communities impacted by their work, and ensuring diverse creators tell stories from their own perspectives. You can create your own future and reality right here by joining us at ASU's Master's Program in Narrative and Emerging Media.
It's kind of fun seeing all the familiar faces of the team there, and Charles as well features. So I guess what I really wanted you guys to know about a bit was beyond the master's program before we sort of jump into really learning more about Cam's project. The education is obviously the flagship of our program, but it's important to us that we are reaching everybody. It's not just people who can afford to go to university. So part of our mission is really providing scholarships and raising funds for scholarships. So a lot of our students are on scholarships. But then we also, we also want to be at the cutting edge of innovation. So we'll have our own research. We're already starting to explore some work with haptics. Stephanie might talk about this later, but we've got a big haptics lab that we're kicking off in October. Just really trying to explore. There are a few great haptics experiences here. Forager I thought was really fantastic. And so we'll be kind of using the amazing facilities to try and explore a little bit more about that. We have an ideation lab, which actually is where we work with corporate partnerships, or it could be nonprofits as well, but basically where people can come in from other organizations if they want to do some research and actually experiment with some of our facilities. So we've got this amazing virtual production studio you could see. We've also been given some incredible cameras, actually. We're setting up a volcap studio. We got some free stuff. I don't know if you know that yet. So, that's really exciting for us. And the idea for us is that our students will then learn from industry partners. And then community engagement. We want to make sure that the local community in LA benefits from us being there. So if we ever have, a workshop, we tend to sort of have different levels. So we'll obviously bring someone over to teach the master's students, but we will also try and open up to the public as well. And then finally, public good and policy leadership. We really want to contribute to changes within our society. So really harnessing this technology for transformative good. So that's a kind of overview of what we're about.
In terms of the first cohort, obviously Cameron killing it, but in telling diverse stories and making sure diverse creators, how are you ensuring that's done, and what are the stories that have been coming out so far?
Yeah, that's a really great point, because it's such a sort of new field. We kind of have students coming from all kinds of backgrounds, okay? I mean, Cameron, when he came, clearly already had skills that were way above what some of the other people had in the course. So, and maybe some of them had huge, vast experience in producing that would be different. So usually people are coming from film, theatre, TV, journalism. There's a lot of journalists and nonfiction students because of my background in Nonny's. But more and more what's interesting is that we're seeing they're coming with more skills. So where Cameron was a little bit unusual in our group because you already had a knowledge, we sort of have to differentiate within our classes, basically. So we made sure that, for example, when there was an Unreal class where clearly he sort of taught Unreal, we ended up giving him a special research project, which was all about AI, which was he'll probably talk about, is like Cam's really interested in that, and then he taught that back to the class. So. It really is kind of trying to meet people where they're at and making sure that they get what they need to be where he is today. So for him, it was really about trying to just guide him through to finish his project, help him finish it, and then get him out there in the world and support him in that way. So really I mean, you might think differently, but I expect that's what you'd say too, that really the biggest support we've given to Cam is to bring him into the industry. And that's what we'd love to do for everybody. That's our intention.
Meeting people where they're at. So let's turn to Body of Mine and dig in here. Cam gave us the opportunity to have a quick overview up front, but for those who really haven't experienced it, Cameron, do you want to just give us kind of the journey of the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So Body of Mine is a full body immersive experience that allows you to see yourself as another gender, where you can interact with your body to discover stories and interviews of trans people. So the project really started with the mission of how can we use immersive mediums to build safe spaces, especially for queer people, when safe spaces in the real world can be hard to find. Kind of the origins came out of a traumatic outing to my family, who are in like the suburbs of Texas, so like very, So after that, we were thinking, how can VR be used to help people in that situation when maybe, they don't have the resources, not just for a transition, but the resources to like come out of the closet or to be able to tell anyone, when you're in a position like that, it's like hard to even tell your best friend. And so combining that with the stories of, it was a student project, so combining that mission with the stories of a lot of people, friends who are going through different stages of their transitions, different surgeries, different stages of coming out. We ended up creating this full body piece that gets you a much deeper understanding of what gender dysphoria might feel like. Obviously, with these things, you'll never really know what gender dysphoria is unless you have gender dysphoria, but we can use mediums to at least try to understand and, most importantly, to listen.
Let's take a look.
Close your eyes with me. And imagine, what if you had been born with a different sex?
I feel like gender dysphoria feels like the inside of your clothes are sandpaper.
It's hard. It sucks being a trans male who's pregnant.
I am a human being with arms, 2 arms. I'm a human being with 10 fingers and nails and skin, internal organs and lungs. And I am human.
So, a very personal story for you. Talk about your journey deciding how to tell that technologically and what you were kind of interested in digging into and exploring in the storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had gone through different iterations of what this experience might be like. It actually started as like a queer homelessness piece, and then somehow we settled on dysphoria. We knew we wanted to use the best of the technology to make a commentary on something that only VR could tell. And so with embodiment, that really is something that only immersive can communicate an issue like that. You can, again, with film, you can watch someone go through dysphoria, but with VR, you can actually step inside that body and see yourself as a body you don't identify with and try to understand what that might be like day to day to day to day to day. And so it was a little ambitious as a first VR project because we had never used, like Vive trackers, and we didn't really know what headset was what. So we had to do a lot of research and kind of figure out the best platform for this experience. We ended up going with Vive because of the different things we were able to, the Vive trackers, the eye tracking, using the best of the most cutting edge technology to really transport you somewhere. And with the mechanisms of being able to interact with your skin to discover these interviews, we wanted to connect people to trans stories through something very tactile and through something very intimate, like touching yourself. And having to place your hand over your heart and feel your heartbeat as you're listening to someone talk about their top surgery, or touching your arm and feeling the hair on your arm as you hear a trans girl talk about how much she hates her arm hair. That kind of like very visceral and tactile connection is something that we found like very special, and so we kind of fused those things together.
Was there a way that it evolved at all as you kind of let people try this and step into that skin? I remember I had a chance to try it first, like before finishing, and I was just amazed, but kind of missed a key information up front, so maybe some of the things that have been put into the experience or changed as a result of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Showing primarily like trans audiences the experience and letting them kind of guide it was the biggest one. And so everything that is in the experience comes originally from the stories that we did. So the whole journey in creating the piece came from just having a conversation with, I think there's somewhere between 12 and 15 different interviews in there. So having 12 to 15 hour to 2 hour long conversations where we're just sitting on my carpet in my room with a mic talking with close friends. So it gives it this real like honesty and trust when you listen to the interviews, because in a way, like the conversation was not between two strangers. And so when you're in the experience, it doesn't feel like you're listening to strangers. It feels like you're listening to someone who's being very open and honest with you. And that's because it came from a place of trust. And so after we did those interviews, we started to design the experience, and it really gave it like this sense of like belonging. If you haven't seen the experience, it takes place inside of a human rib cage. You're standing underneath this giant heart, these lungs, and you're trapped by like the bars of this rib cage, which over the course of the experience blossoms into a garden. the heart becomes a strawberry, the lungs become a tree, and it becomes this big metaphor for growing into your own skin and reclaiming your body. And that came because my roommate, who was going through top surgery, described the gender euphoria as a garden where there's beautiful things, there's fruits, but there's also scary things like snakes and spiders. And so we were kind of looking at the design experience and going like, oh, you know, a heart kind of has like the same shape as a strawberry, and lungs kind of, you know, the aeoli and bronchi of lungs kind of look like a tree. And so we kind of like allowed that to grow naturally. And then by, you know, going back to the people we interviewed, showing them experience, letting them do it, saying like, oh, maybe we should change this quote, or, you know, maybe like this would be better to highlight here, as well as watching a lot of people like try it and like not be able to get it to work, and realizing like, oh, this is like not working. We should give clearer instructions was a big one too.
You mentioned, you know, obviously testing with trans audiences. Talk about some of the reactions that have really shown how people are being impacted by this experience, maybe on various sides of the experience.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the most meaningful screenings we did was at a festival in Oklahoma for Pride Month. Well, you know, like with a piece like this, you get a huge range of reactions. You have people coming out like leaving the headset wet for the next person because they were like bawling, and then you have to like apologize, say, sorry, the headset's wet, I promise it's not sweat, it's just tears. And then you have people who get really uncomfortable by it, and both are equally important. One screening in particular that stands out was being in Oklahoma, and this trans girl coming to find me saying, hey, we found your experience on TikTok. I brought my mom here to see it. I haven't told her what it is. Please don't tell her until she's in the experience. So she brings her mom over, and her mom keeps saying, oh, like my son told me about this thing, or he is gonna, using the wrong pronouns, using the wrong name, even though this girl had very clearly transitioned, like this, you know, it was clearly an ongoing issue and something that was very, you could feel the tension here. And so it was our first time showing someone who's like overtly transphobic, because at a lot of events like this or South by Southwest, it's a little bit preaching to the choir. But there was like a direct, like this is a conversation that needs to be had between two people whose lives could be impacted. And we were afraid she was gonna take the headset off and just, once she realized what it was, but she didn't. She actually listened to the whole, she experienced the whole thing, listened to the whole thing. And whereas before she was very like talkative and very like, oh, how are you liking the film festival? Very chatty. Taking it off, we just kind of stood in silence for a little bit. It was just, and then we, you know, tried to ask questions, and she wasn't really cooperative because she was not necessarily angry, but she was like thinking, and she was uncomfortable, and she was, you know, something struck a chord in there, and I don't know what happened after the festival, after they left. I'm sure it sparked some conversation, and I think with impact pieces, that's what you want. That's the goal, is not to, you know, not to have an immediate take the headset off and I love trans people now. Like, that's not gonna happen. But what you can do is you can get you can put someone in a space where they're gonna listen and think about it, and then when they get home, have a conversation about it. And it's things like that, and many things like that, that end up contributing to change.
Bring them out of the black and white and into that gray zone, sort of. Mary, you talked about co-creation in your kind of interests leading into this field, and I think that's really connected to embodiment. Can you talk a little bit about how that might contribute to that change in developing?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I use a lot. I mean, I can see Lewis is in the audience as well, and he works a lot with me. He's the one with the shades on, looking very cool at the back. And he also has a piece here, by the way, so shout out to Lewis and Conquest of the Skies. So yeah, I mean, I really like to kind of work with my characters as well to try and it's really similar to what Cam did, basically, where you end up trying to have like a conversation with somebody rather than a sort of straightforward interview. So you know, even you know, Letters from Drancy is here, and I actually made one of the films that's part of a series. That's the first one in the series, and I made the next one. And for that, I basically had a 4-hour conversation with Rhodey Glass about her experience of the Dutch Holocaust experience, where 75% of Dutch Jews were killed. So it was a huge untold story, but you know, I sat with her and, you know, just try to get a sense of what are the most important points in her life, or you know, what were the most important bits of her story that we tell. And I think that this happens a lot with Body of Mine as well. And it's one of the things that I thought was really beautiful about it, was that it wasn't necessarily just one chronological story. It was actually selecting little parts that could almost be like a metaphor for, like you said, about the garden. And, you know, the artwork in Body of Mine is absolutely stunning. You know, and then I basically talked to her. So I did 4-hour chat with her, recorded, and then told her what I thought were the, you know, how we could condense 83 years into 20 minutes. And you know, there were certain things that were really important to her, and one of them was that that everybody knows that she, you know, her revenge was that A, she survived, B, she had a huge family, and C, she had joy. She became a party planner. I don't know if I told you this. She was a party planner, and she had a great life. She really, really enjoyed her life. So for me, I sort of begin the film with her 5th birthday, which was the last time her family was together before some of them were killed. And, you know, it's a really joyful moment. You can hear the whole family, and then I end it also at a birthday party because, you know, that was hugely important to her, along with, obviously, just telling this story that she felt wasn't really known about Dutch Jews. So I work really closely with characters in all of my films to just try and, I think it brings out an authenticity that you don't get if you try to sort of impose your own views on something, or you try to impose a structure on a story. Actually, often it just doesn't sound very realistic, or it sounds superficial, whereas there are some things that I could never have imagined that someone with body dysphoria would feel, because I don't have that. And so, but if if I tried to imagine, I don't think it would be what I had seen, you know, or heard with Body of Mine, whereas now I know. See what I mean? Like, there's a real sort of authenticity and credibility to it if you actually work with the people who are your characters.
And in letting people sort of discover that, Cameron, so in that vein, like storytelling and driving the narrative part along versus kind of letting people explore, I guess, how did you see the interplay, and how did you want to find that balance?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'm a filmmaker, so I gravitate towards stories and arcs and having a climax and conclusion. I think personally that can be very, very important sometimes for transformative experiences, really having like a crafted beginning, middle, and end. But at the same time, it's not a film, it's an interactive experience. And so by doing things with the environment, doing things with the stories, and kind of mixing film, game, interactive, immersive elements, and creating this weird like hybrid thing, you can kind of create something that, you know, when people say like, oh, is this a game? I say yes. Is this a film? Yes. Is this immersive? You know, it's kind of all of them and also none of them at the same time. Exploration is super important for immersive work, especially like embodied work, giving people a space to kind of guide their own story. But at the same time, in order to have like a real, and this is just my style as an artist, in order to have like a real sense of like craft and like a real kind of guided commentary on something, I think it's also important to like, you know, create a loose narrative. A narrative can be a lot of things. And so we give people the space to move however they want, to listen to different stories. And then we kind of created this second part of the experience where the environment starts to change, your body starts to change. You see yourself cycle through all these different people, like beautiful big black women, like you know, trans Asian men, like all these just different people that you're seeing yourself like blink as. And through that all, realizing that, like this glowing silhouette, we all still glow with the same humanity. So yeah, I think combining them can produce really powerful results, particularly with what Mary was talking about, authenticity. Sometimes with immersive work, all the time with immersive work, we're fighting the friction of getting people in the headset and the cables and the Oculus menu and like doing this, and suddenly you see the Oculus logo, and like there's all this friction, and it really takes like dedicated thought, like Mary was saying, to still keep that level of authenticity and intimacy.
But also what was kind of cool about what you did about, you know, if things go wrong, you kind of adapted. And that was actually really cool, because then your immersion isn't broken. You know, the worst thing is if you break the immersion, right? And why don't you tell them about that? Because that was fun.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a good point. So just like what Mary was saying, sometimes like sometimes in life, limits can really be like the best creatively. And so for Body of Mind, we use 7 points of tracking on the wrists, the elbows, the pelvis, and the ankles. And with 7 points of track, it's not a suit. There's only so far you're going to go with the tracking. And that's even without what happens if a tracker dies, or what happens, like we learned at South by Southwest, if your neighbor has a really strong Wi-Fi router. There's all these different issues. And so what we did is leaned into that and allowed the imperfections of tracking in 2023 to be part of the experience. Body of Mind is about gender dysphoria, which is about the misalignment of mind and body. And, you know, having imperfect tracking creates a misalignment between mind and body. And so we really leaned into that and allowed the kind of uncanny valley of, you know, maybe your hand is not exactly here, or you go to touch your chest and maybe it's, you know, a little bit to the left, a little bit out. The response of moving and seeing your body respond to that creates a belief in the experience that then when you add this layer of imperfection onto it, creates, you know, the point of the experience. I think every experience needs a point. And so for Body Mind, we're able to use that tracking to make a point of what dysphoria is like.
There's so many places we could go. I know you're so interested in, you know, next up for embodiment stories potentially, but why don't you talk about what's next in terms of Body of Mind and then potentially other projects you might be interested in?
Yeah, definitely. There's a bunch coming, actually, with Body, Mind, and beyond. So after Venice, we're traveling to Germany, where we're partnering with the University of Tübingen to begin doing research on how Body of Mind can be used to treat gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia. So we'll be kicking off a big campaign where obviously this will be a many-year study, but we'll be kicking this off. We'll be collaborating with the Trevor Project, with other universities across Europe and in North America, and hopefully even more beyond. And we'll be able to use that data to actually see how these experiences can be used to help people, or what risks they present for people who have these issues. At the same time, we're in the very, very early stages of bringing it to the Quest, with the plan of doing a wider Quest release as soon as technically possible. And then beyond that, I'm also looking at creating new experiences also. I'm working on one at the moment called A Cure for Straightness, which uses an AI character combined with real interviews of conversion therapy survivors to convince you to be gay. And it makes a commentary on the absurdity of conversion therapy. Also super interested in how AI can be used to create more transformative experiences. That could be like a whole conversation. Yeah. Me and Nonny and Mary that trailer made those classes look very pleasant, but really it was like us really yelling at each other. So very interested in how AI can be used to create intimate and authentic experiences, looking at building experiences, not just for embodiment, but also for Apple's new headset, for full domes, for shared reality experiences, for AR. Through all of that work, I think the through line that I see myself bringing is the intimacy that Body Mind provides, and looking at how can we use all these technology from AI to platforms and create real intimacy and like shared connection and transformative experiences.
Mary, Is there anything, from your experience diving into these programs and getting to work with Cameron that you're looking ahead to incorporate in your work coming up?
Gosh, yes. I mean, one thing that a couple of things I wanted to say. One is that one of the cool things about what we do is Nonny and I both, if we're working on, because we're both professors of practice, so Cam will know that, we sort of also share with the students our own ups and downs with our projects. So, and sometimes you have an amazing breakthrough, and then you kind of, I'd bring everybody into the little room outside the kayak and show them, what was going on. And then other times you're like, oh God, it's still really bad, or it's just taking a really long time to get that right. So, that was kind of cool because they get to kind of live through, live projects that we're working on and learn about the ups and downs as well, And then the other thing is also our sort of industry links that are really, really important. And I can see Neil here from COSM because it's really important to us that we, introduce students to our industry friends. And they've really welcomed us and our mission and actually really, really supported us. So that's something that we definitely want to continue with. From my personal work, I'm really excited about the haptics lab that we're kicking off because I come from a 360 tradition, which I love, but I also can see the limitations around the interactivity and therefore the immersion, and have really sort of played a lot more recently with mixing, 360 with animated scenes. And that became really beautiful and a really kind of beautiful thing to sort of portray memory especially. But the haptics is going to be really fun to sort of explore. And I'm also kind of looking at some stories around abortion, being transgender, the sort of anti-gay culture within the US in particular at the moment. Being a foreigner, it's kind of interesting for me to come in and see that and really shocking as well. So I'm going to kind of explore haptics around that. So we've got this lab, which it would be great if anybody's in LA, they should come to it on the 11th and 12th of October. So let me know if you're in town for that. But yeah, and that's initially just going to be playing around and trying to experiment and learn from each other. And hopefully, I'll bring that into my work.
Amazing. Well, I think we might have time for just one audience question. If anybody wants to ask Cam or Mary a question up here. And we're also going to be available outside, obviously, up next.
Yeah, well, Cam's about to do a double
feature.
He's about to, you can hear all of this again.
If you want to hear literally the same exact thing, come outside in 5 minutes.
But maybe we'll give you an Aperol spritz before and see whether he'll start telling truths about our discussions on AI. Were really quite fun. That was really fun.
That's a risk. Don't do that.
It's true. It's true.
I think one important thing I wanted to end on was that, so we have these brand new master's programs, both in California and Arizona, and we're helping making these accessible by launching an upcoming campaign called Worlds for Change Challenge, which is about youth visions of the future and enabling people to get the tools to create those visions. So we're going to be launching a contest for 2 scholarships to any one of these graduate programs coming up. And that's launching this month in September, and we're having a big event coming up in October as well.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah, that's going to be super exciting. And, I think it's launching out of Arizona. We're trying to do a lot more work together so that we are joining our programs and talking about them as a sort of suite. And the only other thing to talk about are our fellows.
So in addition to the cohorts and the incoming cohorts, we have XArts Immersive Media Fellowships. So we're in our 2nd year of that program, and we have 3 amazing fellows that are based both in Arizona and Los Angeles. Dr. Cyan Proctor, who's a SpaceX astronaut, the first African-American, female pilot she's a scientist, but also an artist, and won her trip to space based on that, and has incorporated that into her work. We have
Sultan Sharif, again, who's fantastic, and he's actually going to be leading our haptics lab, and he also incorporates sort of volumetric capture into his final project. And then the third person is Marta
Mendizabal, and she's runs a lab called Techno-Latinx,
That's right.
and it's all about education and bringing youth, giving youth the skills to introduce them to XR technologies and create immediately through workshops all around LA.
Yeah, and they've sort of brought that to hundreds of young people. They've really, and I know Unity for Humanity have been working with them too. So that's an amazing project. It's a really good one. Cool.
All right.
Any more?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. Thank you.
See you outside.